¿Qué tal? Gracias por seguir con nosotros en este evento digital. Estamos muy honrados de tener a nuestra siguiente invitada. Voy a cambiar de idioma a inglés para poder comunicarnos mejor con nuestra invitada, pero estamos muy entusiasmados. Thank you, Kelly, for being here with us. We are very honored in having you with us for this digital event. For us, behavioral economics is part of a definite instrument to promote savings in the long term in Mexico. Hearing you will be of the utmost importance for Afores, for workers, and of course for the association. Thank you for being here. I'm gonna read very quickly Kelly's background. She is the CEO, the CEO and co-founder of BEWorks, with over a decade of experience applying behavioral science in businesses and banking. Kelly is internationally recognized as a thought leader in the field. She has developed behavioral change programs for Fortune 500 companies such as Unilever, IBM, PepsiCo, and CVS. Applauded for her ability to make behavioral science accessible and relatable, Kelly shares personal and professional stories that help audiences understand scientific concepts and appreciate scientific thinking. She has published numerous scientifically peer-reviewed articles and chapters within textbooks on the subject, from delivering keynote talks at various global platforms like TEDx, the World Business Forum, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Board, to sharing her insights through media publications such as Forbes, the New York Times, and Strategy Magazine. Kelly is a potent communicator, and we are so honored to have you. Thank you for being here, and I'll give the floor to you, Kelly, so that you can give us your insights. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a wonderful honor and an incredible privilege to be a part of this event and to share behavioral economics with you. I'm very passionate that behavioral economics can help us to transform society and the economy. So it's my honor to be able to share this incredibly powerful discipline with you. The challenge that we're talking about in terms of driving savings is not inconsequential. Saving for retirement's a challenge for almost everyone. It feels so far into the future, and it's more natural for all of us to just focus on our immediate needs. That's not to say that we don't understand the importance of thinking about retirement, and maybe we are aware of the need to start saving early. Maybe we know those things, but that doesn't make it any easier to actually follow through on that. And the challenge in Mexico, as I understand it, is quite significant. Some steps have been taken. The government's created policies such as automatically directing a percentage of people's salary into their retirement account. About 6.5% is automatically directed into people's accounts. Now, this helps. This is something. It's better than nothing. But the challenge is many workers think that that's enough. We think that that's, if we just rely on these mandatory contributions, then we're okay. It's hard to accept the fact that that's actually less than 30% of your current salary now available for you in retirement. It's very difficult to forecast the impact of this on your future needs. And then to make things more complicated, that only covers a small percentage of the employment sector. Over 2/3 of people work independently or in the informal economy, and there is no employer there to make these automatic contributions for people. So it's clear that to have a comfortable retirement, then people will have to still rely on their own ability to contribute voluntarily to set up their retirement accounts. But this will have serious repercussions because as people age, as society changes, and the ability to depend on one's children to help one out for the long term, these options become less and less viable as time goes on. Increasing retirement contributions will not only improve the lives of individual people, but will help improve the financial stability of the country. So we have a very big challenge ahead of us. Behavioral economics can help with some solutions for this. Behavioral economics emerged from traditional economics, which was understanding people's behavior, understanding our relationship to money, but it went a very different direction because traditional economic models don't actually explain real behavior in the real world. As I mentioned earlier, just because we're aware that we need to save doesn't mean we necessarily do it. Awareness and financial literacy are common tools that we rely on, but they don't seem to be fully adequate to change behavior. Awareness is obviously a good thing, but we need to fundamentally change behavior. And this is where behavior science and behavioral economics comes to life. It gives us a framework for understanding the things that shape our decisions and the biases that lead us to suboptimal behavior. And that's great. That's great. We can understand these biases that explain this gap between what we say we want and what we need and what we actually do. This is a great underpinning of behavior science. It's about the psychology of our decisions. But it doesn't stop there. The real power of behavioral economics comes from the next part of it. And that is what we can do to drive change. It's not just about understanding human decisions. It's about using these biases, this knowledge that we have about human behavior to affect behavior change. One of the most common tools that's emerged from behavioral economics is called the nudge. And the nudge is this idea that we can use a bias to, in fact, help us to make better decisions. A classic example of all of this comes from the realm of organ donation. So organ donation is one of those things that many people say that they think is very important for society. They think it's something that they are willing to support. And in fact, if they needed to have a donated organ, they would want one if it would help keep them alive. But countries around the world actually have very different levels of participation in organ donation participation rates. There's many countries where the participation rate is over 80%, and then many countries where the participation rate is below 20%. And it's this very extreme around the world in terms of these different levels of participation. And the research actually shows that it's not that people have different attitudes about organ donation. It's simply that the way that we are enrolled in these programs differs across different countries. In the countries where the participation rates are very high, governments in these countries have defaulted people into these programs as a part of your driver's license or a health insurance card. You're defaulted in as a donor with the ability to change your participation rate. And then on the other hand, the countries where the participation rate is very low requires people to take an active step and to enroll in the program. And in these cases, we see that only a handful, up to 20% of people, are actually willing to take the steps to enroll in the program. The lesson for us is in the power of status quo bias in changing and influencing our behavior. In fact, these defaults can override what is something that we would believe in. Now, part of it is maybe we think we'll get around to doing it later. Maybe we think that most people aren't doing it. If the default is a certain way, we're not going to change it. The lessons from this organ donation example are actually very powerful for looking at and understanding the effectiveness of defaults in retirement savings programs. Why else would we default employees in if we didn't already believe that people could maximize their own savings? The reason why we default employees in to these retirement savings contributions is because we know that defaults are very, very powerful. But the challenge is that they're so powerful that once they're set, people don't necessarily make adjustments. People don't necessarily make additional contributions. Whatever that default rate is set at is likely to set and shape the behavior that people have going forward. So we've seen in research in countries around the world, if the default rate is set at something even as low as 2.5% or 3%, that people will not make additional contributions. And as I've discussed before, that will lead them to a very suboptimal outcome for their long-term future. So defaults are very, very powerful. And it's a great tool to start the process of influencing people's retirement savings. I wanted to give a very different look, though, at how far behavioral economics can take us in very creative interventions for shaping and influencing behavior. And that's an example that I have here. Let me bring this forward. This is a project that was done in Nairobi, Kenya, with people who had access to cell phones, but also had access to a savings account that was attached to the cell phone. These are users of a money transfer service called M-Pesa, and they had tens of thousands of customers who were regularly using their cell phone for money transfer. But even though they were also offered a savings account, no one really used it. And so the question was, how can we get people to use the savings account? They're already using the money transfer service. How can we also encourage them to set aside some money and to take advantage of the savings account? Many things have been tried, including brochures and information and the benefits of saving, but none of them had been particularly effective. So the team brainstormed a number of other strategies to impact and influence maybe the way that people save. So one of them was, perhaps we can get people to save more if we give them a weekly text reminder. Because they already have the cell phone, we have the ability to text them. And think about that. If you were texted every week to increase your savings, do you think that that might help you? And included in that text was the amount of your balance. So think about whether or not that might increase your likelihood to save. Now, a second strategy was tried. When people were enrolled in the program, they were asked if they had kids. And a random selection of customers was chosen to be in this group. This was a weekly text reminder, but now there was a message customized as if it came from their kids. And instead of saying just, hey, don't forget to save this week, in this condition, the intervention said basically, hey, mommy, or hey, daddy, don't forget to save this week. And it was signed, love, from your children. And this was used as a way to encourage people to save. And this one also included the balance. Now, another hypothesis that was tested was this idea of giving people a financial incentive to save. People were offered 10% of what they saved that week would be given to them as an encouragement to save. The second and related hypothesis that was tested was, what if we were to give people 20% match? Now, 20% match is obviously a very high amount of money to give to people, but this was an experiment that was run. It was an experiment that was run across over 3,000 people. And so a small number were in this condition. And so we got the budget to test just to see, because we were curious, if 10% would have an impact, would 20% have an even greater impact on people's likelihood to save? And if it does, maybe that's going to teach us a lot about what people need to be encouraged to save. Now, there was something else that the researchers tried, which was, one is give them this savings amount as a reward after making the savings, making the deposit into the account. But another insight from behavioral economics is this power of loss aversion. We already have something in our hand. It's very difficult for us to give that item up. We feel a great pain of loss. It's this notion of this power of loss aversion. So the hypothesis here was, what if we were to determine an amount, the maximum amount, and deposit that into people's account at the beginning of the week before they made their deposit? And the rule is, if you don't make your deposit, we're going to take this incentive back. And this was tested with both the 10% incentive as well as the 20% incentive match. So this is this idea of using an incentive to impact and influence behavior. And then the last thing that was tried was a gold-colored coin. The coin, which you can see in the image here, the coin was, people were given instructions every week that they make a deposit, scratch off one of the numbers on the edge of the coin. And this experiment ran for 24 weeks. There were 12 numbers on the front, 12 numbers on the back, and they were asked to scratch off the number that corresponded with the week it was in the program. And here, the hypothesis was this idea of having a coin in your hand, something tangible, would help increase people's likelihood to save. Now, I would love for the listeners to think for a moment about which of these conditions is the one that would have the highest impact on people's likelihood to save. Now, I've done this with votes in the audience before, and I could tell you what most people choose, but I'll give you a moment. Is it the weekly text reminder, number 1, the weekly text reminder with the children, 2, the financial match as a reward at the 10% condition or at the 20% condition, or the variations using the loss aversion, or finally the gold-colored coin? Now, for scientific thinking, the best thing for you to do would be to determine which one do you think had the strongest effect, and to outline your rationale for why. Now I'm going to tell you what most people choose. Most people actually choose either the 20% loss aversion match, because that seems the most powerful and actually puts the most money into people's hands. And the second condition that people tend to choose is the one with the text reminder from children. This idea of the guilt from one's children can be highly effective at increasing people's likelihood to save. The thing that actually has the biggest impact, though, is the gold coin. In fact, I've worked in very large audiences and had very few people actually predict that the gold coin would work. There's no information that's being provided. There's no financial incentive that's being provided. It's not using the purpose of the saving for the children. In fact, it's just a gold coin, no more, no less. But what research suggests is that one of the challenges that we face with money is that it's, with savings in particular, is it's so abstract. There's no immediate reward. You don't see anything. It's tucked away in a bank, and you don't have this benefit of having this money in hand. Many of the ways that we save are actually, you get no feedback at all from that, no sense of doing a good job. Whereas spending, on the other hand, spending gives us this joy. We get the immediate gratification, whether it's we have a new car, or we can see our house, or we can see our new shoes or new toys for the kids. We can immediately see these things and get the immediate gratification from it. Savings has quite an uphill battle of what it's competing against, not just for your money, but also for your psychological energy. So the idea here is, how do we bring some of that immediate tangibility forward with this coin? Now, there are some other components of this that are interesting for us to deconstruct. And that's this idea of the streak that you might get. Some people might have thought about coin being powerful because you scratch off the number, and people like to create these streaks and sustained streaks. We know that that has a very powerful impact on behavior. So that's another reason why this particular intervention might be effective. Now, we also have some competing hypotheses, some other possible explanations of why this might be effective. The fact that it's gold, the fact that it seems magical, the fact that maybe this coin might have some power of good luck. Those might be other elements to help this coin be effective. And so it means for us, we have other questions to continue to build upon in terms of thinking about different ways to encourage savings. If we just step back now, in terms of what does behavior science give us? It gives us this way of thinking about the different barriers that people face. They go above and beyond just having information about savings. We need to understand that in our day-to-day lives, it's impossible, obviously, to pay attention to some of these longer-term priorities. And retirement isn't an immediate need. We focus on what's in front of us. And without any direct and active cues to direct our attention towards our long-term financial future, we may never start to actively think about it. And when we do start to think about money and retirement, pension funds and retirement savings might not come to mind. Another barrier that we need to think about is the perceived household cost. When it comes to thinking about how we plan for our retirement and doing the paperwork and getting these accounts set up, it's all seen as very lengthy and complicated and complex, and that we don't understand these financial choices and the different products. And so we need to make it easy for people to contribute. And the defaults are a very good start at doing that. The next barrier that we face is the lack of trust that people have with their financial institutions. Trust is central to relationships. Trust is central to knowing where and how people will put their money. But the ideas that many people have is that we don't trust the financial system, and we're worried that our funds will disappear. They won't be there when we need them. So having regular and concrete reminders and transparency that your funds are there, that they're even available to you if necessary before retirement, are things that could actually help build trust. We also have to recognize that people make decision-making errors when it comes to thinking about their retirement. Maybe they're overconfident because they think that they've got other things that they can do to make it easy. Maybe they think that they'll continue working, or that their kids will help them, or that maybe they've got it figured out and they can overcome the problem. One of the ways that we can maybe confront that overconfidence is to show them what other people are doing like them, other people like them, to help encourage that savings, the people that are the best at making the trade-off for today, and show those examples as social proof of better ways to manage your financial savings. And as I mentioned before, we also need to recognize the challenge of present bias. We need to figure out ways to create more immediate rewards for people so that savings isn't something that's a delayed gratification. How do we make that more salient for today? And we've had the opportunity to do some very interesting work at BEWorks, looking at ways that maybe we can nudge impulsive savings amongst people who are members of plans. Maybe we can take advantage of the fact that sometimes people have a little extra money. How do we regularly ask them, instead of asking on a long-term basis, how can we regularly ask them to think about contributing in an impulse way? We think about impulse spending, but why don't we think about ways to help encourage impulse savings? So one of the strategies that we tried with a pension fund was to encourage people to think about their future selves. And we developed a communication tool that helped close the gap between the people that we are today and a vision and an understanding of ourselves in our retirement. And so we paired this kind of this visualization of your future self with operational transparency of how the pension fund administrator actually works on people's behalf. And we made it clear through the steps that an advisor takes to understanding how to structure a product, that the tools were personalized to meet people's needs. We made it very clear that there was a lot of work that was being done in terms of members' behalf to increase their likelihood to feel safe. These communications were tied to request to save right now, even if it was a very small amount, and asked on a routine basis in order to encourage ongoing savings. So the bottom line is that behavioral economics can help us have a more realistic understanding of the barriers that we face in terms of how people feel and how they think about themselves today and in the future. And until we're ready to get into a deep understanding of this psychology and bringing these psychological insights into our boardrooms, it'll be very difficult for us to develop products and services that can overcome those barriers. And the second part of behavioral economics is about giving us these nudges, these very creative interventions that work with those biases to drive behavior. So fundamentally, I believe that behavioral economics can be incredibly useful for the goals that we have in the financial services sector to help people live lives that are happier, healthier, wealthier, and to help them make wiser decisions. I hope you agree with me that behavioral economics has the opportunity to transform society and the economy.
Absolutely, Kelly. Thank you so much for your insights. It is amazing to see and understand the power of behavioral economics and how these strategies sometimes can really change how people behave, and is based on this concept of the nudges that you just explained, and of course the excellent example from M-Pesa in Kenya. So I think it is wonderful how this connects and how it can really help people for, as you were saying at the end of your comments, to improve the future and the quality of life of people, and that's again what this panel and what this event is all about: the future. How will the 2050 will look like for the world, for Mexicans, and particularly which retirement system we require to tackle that future, which will be definitely promising in terms of more longevity for people because of health advances. It will definitely be more digital, and of course we need to incorporate these tools of behavioral science. I just have one question, Kelly, for you, in order to wrap up this panel. What do you expect for economic theories in 2050. How can the technological advances, the behavioral science, could transform the future? How can you see, I mean, I know you're not a wizard, and you have a crystal ball, but we need to hear from you. What would you expect from the future, from the economic theories trying to explain how people behave? Could you tell us something in that regard, please?
Wonderful. I think it's such a powerful question. It helps us to unleash the imagination. And if I had a magic wand, in addition to that crystal ball, I would love to be able to create a nudge wallet and a nudge bank. And the ideal would be a cradle to grave strategy for people that facilitated interventions along the way, along the journey of helping when children, when we're young, start to learn how to save, start to learn the understanding and the value of money. That bank account would be used to help them make small purchases when they're young, to start that training process so that they can understand the time value of money. There's fantastic research on understanding willpower and teaching children how to make a trade-off between a marshmallow today versus 2 marshmallows tomorrow. Helping teach children that trade-off would be fantastic, so that as we get older and those trade-offs become far more complex, then we already have some foundational skills in that. This idea where we can help people have access to different layers of their money, little points of friction to stop them before making spending choices that might not be the most prudent. So putting in little frictions. There's an app called Movin that lets people, it's a digital app, they put in their savings account. On the screen of the app, before you open up your savings account to purchase something, it makes you scratch off on the screen and sort of create this visual perception that you're breaking the glass, even though you're not actually breaking the glass. They scratch and just kind of create this little reminder. And it's like, are you sure that this is what you want to do? Are you sure? And it's an in the moment kind of a question. Bringing in all of these different interventions, doing things like where we default every time we make a transaction, round up and have that go to a long-term savings account. All of these things add up and compound over time. So imagine, every time as a child you bought a candy bar, that little extra bit was rounded up. As a young adult, every time you spend, that little extra bit was rounded up and put into a long-term savings account. So this idea of this nudge bank, where of course people can have the controls and the toggles to turn things on and to turn things off, but I think that could get us to a future where people are in a stronger, more robust, not only in terms of the quality of their own financial decision making, but also building a system that makes it very easy.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for that insight of the future. It's really exciting what is ahead of us and what you're doing as a practitioner, as an expert in behavioral science, what BEWorks is doing. I would like to announce that we are soon signing an agreement with BEWorks in order to collaborate here in Mexico and try to promote further the savings of workers. So all this knowledge, all this experience from Kelly will be used here in Mexico to promote more savings for retirement. Thank you so much for being here, Kelly. And
Thank you.
It was great to meet you and great to having you here.
Likewise, thank you so much.
See you soon. Síganos, por favor, no se vayan. Tenemos todavía más cosas interesantes para platicar con ustedes. Gracias por su atención.